Hello, I'm Jeff Rose, a senior attorney with the Institute for Justice, and I have the pleasure today to be here with my client, Donna Peizer. Donna is an end-of-life doula, and what that means is that she helps people who are passing away with the transition from life to death and helps their families hold home funerals in private homes. Donna and her end-of-life doula colleagues got in trouble from the California Cemetery and Funeral Bureau back in November 2019. They said that the end-of-life doulas have to become funeral directors and that their nonprofit Full Circle has to become a licensed funeral establishment. We've brought a constitutional lawsuit to challenge this on First and 14th Amendment grounds. Donna, thanks for being here with me today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Jeff. Good to see you again.
You too. What is an end-of-life doula?
Well, just like you said, Jeff, we are people who take care of end-of-life matters and help families to care for their loved ones at the end of life in their homes, possibly. And then when death comes to that person, we often help them have a home funeral, which means that the deceased stays in the home for anywhere from a few hours to maybe 3 days to allow the family to say a very personal, private goodbye, which may involve special ceremonies, either religious or non-religious, very creatively designed by the family itself. And our role is to step back, but to be available to demonstrate what needs to be demonstrated to the family in the care of their loved ones, to make adjustments to the plan that we've come up with before this happens, to facilitate, to make sure everything goes smoothly and the family has a beautiful experience.
And so it sounds like an end-of-life doula is a little bit like a birth doula in the sense that you're focused on the emotional needs and well-being, not kind of the technical stuff like, birth doulas are focused on the needs of the mother and the doctor is focused on the medical needs. It sounds like you're focused on sort of the practical and emotional needs of the family and the dying person, but you're not doctors or some other kind of professional like a funeral director, for example.
Right. We're not medical people and we're not funeral directors. Our role is to fill the gap between the patient's medical providers and hospice. Hospice isn't there all the time.
Why would a family want to have a home funeral?
That's a really good question. And partly it has to do with who is becoming elderly at this point, and that is the baby boomers. I was a ghostwriter for a PhD in psychology dissertation a few years ago. And the research had to do with the expectations of baby boomers as they were reaching age 65. And baby boomers has always been known for their protests, their wanting to do things differently. And the research in this dissertation completely showed that same set of attitudes and expectations. And they were, even if they didn't know anything about home funeral, they were just saying, we're just going to do this differently. This isn't going to happen to us. And it was quite striking. So part of it is our aging population now and what their different needs. The other thing is that people have had very traumatic experiences sometimes with the funeral industry, not blaming the funeral industry, but they function in a certain way. And when that happens, like the funeral home shows up with the black bag, the person is put on the stretcher, off they go, and the family members may or may not ever see them again. So there's no opportunity to release more slowly in a kinder and gentler way.
Back in November of 2019, you and your colleagues, other end-of-life doulas and Full Circle, are helping your community in Nevada County, California, and then you get a letter from the state funeral regulator saying that you have to stop advertising and you have to stop doing the activities, which include speaking to people and engaging in assistance during home funerals. And they said you have to stop doing that until you become a licensed funeral establishment and become licensed funeral directors. How did that make you and the other end-of-life doulas feel?
We were shocked, quite frankly. This just came out of the blue, and we were definitely shocked and taken aback and couldn't imagine what it was that we were doing that that would precipitate something like that.
And so you wound up having a conference with the cemetery bureau staff, and the letter they sent you didn't come with any evidence or any details about what you were doing wrong. And so you asked them, what are we doing wrong? What laws are we violating? And how did that go?
Well, they really had no answer. They just said many.
You're violating many laws, but they won't tell you what the laws are.
Right. They didn't cite any of them. So I cited one of them that had to do with funeral establishments and pointed out to them how we absolutely do not meet any of the criteria for being a funeral establishment. But, none of our attempts to, explain what we do or to ask questions about what they were accusing us of were productive at all.
And so the bottom line is you came out of the conference and they said, stop advertising and stop engaging in the activities that are described on the website, which include giving advice to families. It includes, having promotional language, advertising on your website to explain what you do, and to stop doing the actual in-person assistance you give at home funerals until you become a funeral director. In terms of turning Full Circle, which owns no property, into a funeral establishment, what is it that you're expected to do?
Well, I guess we're expected to acquire a building, because that's the main qualification for being a funeral establishment in California under the statute. We do all our work in private homes, so we don't need a building. We don't currently have a building. And then that building is supposed to be equipped with refrigeration capable of storing human remains over, lengthy periods of time. And it's supposed to have a setup for embalming, which is quite elaborate. And of course, we don't do either of those things. So all three criteria in California, we have nothing to do with our work whatsoever.
And what's the average annual budget of Full Circle?
$11,000 this past year.
So your $11,000 charity, in which you, the end-of-life doulas, or volunteers, basically has to build $1 million physical structure and
something
outfit.
Like that.
What you have joined with us to do here at IJ is to bring a challenge to vindicate not just your free speech rights, your right to give advice, the rights of families to receive that advice, your right to engage in commercial speech and promotional speech, and the right of people to hear it, and then also your due process right to act, and the due process rights of families to actually hold home funerals, to invite other lay people to provide assistance who have knowledge and wisdom like you. And we are very excited to join you and fight this out in federal court, not just to defend your rights, but to defend the rights of families and end-of-life doulas all across the country. So I want to thank you for joining us here at IJ.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, IJ. We are so overwhelmed with gratitude because, of course, this is something we could never do. We would just be stuck. That's all.